Deborah Ager joins us from Maryland to share her journey from marketing consultant to book coach, helping entrepreneurs and professionals turn their ideas into books. We talk creativity, self-doubt, and finding joy in the process, even when it's hard. Welcome to the show. This episode is brought to you by my book, Brand Jitsu. Move your brand from meh to memorable. Brand Jitsu is the battle-tested method I've been using for nearly 20 years to help artists, entrepreneurs, and businesses find shape and share their stories so everyone gets it. And where do you get a copy of this amazing book? Glad you asked. Head over to brandjitsu.com to order a signed copy, or get it at Indigo, Chapters, Kohl's, Barnes & Noble, or head down to your local independent bookstore and ask them to bring it in.
Well, welcome to the Rebel Rebel. I'm your host, Michael Dargie, and somewhere across the world from me, we'll find out where, I've got Deborah Ager. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm from Maryland in the USA.
Yay, Maryland! I've never been, but it looks lovely.
We're known for crab cakes and our very strange state flag. We probably have one of the weirdest flags.
Tell me about your flag.
It has four main colors: red, white, blue, gold, and I think it's four different designs. And people wear it. People wear elements of it on headbands, T-shirts, wristbands. Right. I didn't even realize this was unusual until other people mentioned, why do people in Maryland wear so much Maryland flag stuff?
Is it a crab cake?
What's the element? We have the Chesapeake Bay, which kind of doesn't quite divide Maryland, but it sort of does, because the bay comes up in between two pieces of Maryland, and the eastern shore and the western side of the state are quite different. And we're known for crabs and people fishing for crabs, and crab cakes are a thing, especially if you go to the eastern shore.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So many questions, but unrelated entirely to Radiant Media Labs. Tell me about Radiant Media Labs. That's your thing, right? That's what you're up to.
Yeah, that's my business that I started around 2014, 2015, originally to help organizations with their marketing, because that's what I've been doing most recently in my career up to that point.
Oh.
And so I'd been working for a very large billion-dollar organization. And when I left there, a lot of those folks hired me as a marketing consultant because they too had left the organization by that point. And so I had sort of had this built-in network of clients, which is great. Well, over time, and that was fine. Over time, I was asked to write a book for someone in the marketing field. And at first I said no, because that wasn't what I did. I was a marketing consultant. But he said, well, you understand content marketing and you can write and you understand my business. I'd love for you to help me, to write my book for me.
Wow.
So eventually I said yes. And that was a turning point in my business where I realized I really like this. This is fun. And I could see how the book was helping him to get more clients. It was helping him at his speaking engagements. He could have it there. It described his process for prospective clients. And it was really helpful to a business, to keep chugging along, and kept people employed and all that kind of thing, or contributed to it anyway. Yeah. And I thought, well, this is really cool. I'd like to help more people do this. So I began to explore that idea more.
Wow. So are you a ghostwriter?
I started out as a ghostwriter. I don't do that quite as much now, but I did originally write a fair number of books for people. And now what I do is I help them clarify their ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of people will come to me and say, I have so much research because they've done a dissertation, or I have so much research because I worked in the corporate world for, 25 or 30 years. And or I'm a lawyer and I was trained to write in a boring way. So I need some help. I worked with a fair number of lawyers. So people will find some aspect of my background that they resonate with, and then I'll help them clarify their book idea, pressure test it to see, would people be interested in this idea? Can the idea be fleshed out further? And help them begin to assemble the content that goes into it. And then after that, once we sort of know we have something to work with, we'll move into the next stage that is called developmental editing.
So full disclosure, I just wrote my first book and it was hard.
Yeah.
Writing is hard. how do you find the joy in, and maybe it's not hard for you. Maybe it's just like, you're fulfilling your life's purpose. But my experience was it's difficult. Editing is even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, something that's very interesting, editing is part of writing. And once I began to see that, it helped me see editing a different way. It's really just another stage of the writing process. We sometimes think writing is just the formulation of sentences from our fingers through the keyboard into a digital document. But it's actually like part of the process of revision, which is editing, is also revisioning, which I think is lovely to think about, is how can we revision the writing that we already have? And then sometimes we're doing some rewriting at that stage. Anyway, I see it part of the same process. The initial writing and getting the ideas down on paper can be very hard because we're just starting to get those ideas down on paper, and it can feel hard to articulate that into something tangible, into something other people can understand. And as to your point about joy, that's really interesting because it's not a 100% joyful process for me. But it might be for some people. But sometimes it's joyful. Sometimes it feels hard. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? All these feelings are normal. I like to talk about it because I don't want people to feel like what they're feeling is not normal. And when I work with people, I point out that, if you're feeling self-doubt, if you're feeling uncertain anyone will ever want to read this, these are all normal ideas that most people have. Unless you've been writing for 40 years and selling, national bestsellers.
Sure.
And so you have a readership. But
if you're Stephen King, you probably don't.
Stephen King, I was going to mention Stephen King. But it was interesting because I was at a book launch party for one of my clients a few weeks ago in New York, and she talked about how the process for her is joyful. And I realized, you know what? Maybe it's just about a mindset shift for all of us who aren't 100% joyful in the process. Maybe there's something we can be asking ourselves or some other way we can be looking at the process so that we can enjoy it. And because why shouldn't we enjoy it? Just like we might enjoy anything else that we like in life,
Yeah, no, it's such a great point. Yeah. I wrote the book and I don't want to make this about me, but I just think it's a great tie-in. I asked my editor, I'm just like, is it normal to hate your book? And she goes, oh, honey. She goes, here's what happens. I'm like, I'm all ears. She's like, you have an idea for a book and you love it and you think it's the best book idea ever. Then you sit down and you write it, and it's not easy, but you're passionate about it, so you have some joy around like the words that you're putting on page and the way that you're doing it. When you get to the edit phase, she goes, you're going to hate your book. That it's just normal, like because it's so much. You got to move this part around over here to make more sense, or like it's been inside your head for so long that now another person's reading it and they don't get it, so you need to reformulate and add things. She goes, then what'll happen is that you'll get the book in your hands and you'll love it again. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can't wait for that. She goes, but then when you read it, you're going to hate it again because you'll notice inconsistencies and stuff. You're going to pick it apart in a way that the average reader won't. So I think that just understanding that that's the journey that we're on is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's very normal to have those feelings about the book. And it's also normal to have some feelings show up about having the book out there for other people to see and read, because we don't tend to love judgment. We're not like, oh, can please everyone judge my work now? Please bring in more criticism. We don't really like that too much. So it can feel very nerve-wracking to know that your book and your ideas will be out there and not to be 100% sure how everyone will receive them. And when people ask me about that, I'll just say, you know what? Just know that there's going to be a certain percentage who aren't going to like your book, just like there's a certain percentage of people who are not going to like us. But that's fine, because most people are going to, be neutral or like us. There's going to be very few people who aren't going to like something completely. But a book might not appeal to someone because it's not something they need right now. Well, they're not your ideal reader anyway. That's why when I start with people on clarifying their book, we actually start with who is your ideal reader, and we go very deep on that so that we know the content will resonate with this certain group of people. Absolutely.
That's such a great point. But I'm so glad you brought that up. My editor said, who's this book for her very first question. And I had a very clear answer. And she's just like, that is amazing, because most people don't know who they're writing for. I love that.
Mhm.
Deborah, oh, truth bombs.
Yeah, truth bombs. And the other thing that can be interesting is sometimes there's a primary audience and there's a secondary audience. And so I'm
Oh,
working on a couple books now where that's the case. And in one case, I think it's going to be in one case, I think it's fine. I've told the author that you go for the primary audience, and then the secondary audience who might not realize they have the issue that your book is helping them to solve. Some of them are going to come and some of them aren't, but that primary audience will be in the position to sort of get those people, into reading the book, going through the process and all that kind of thing. So every book is very unique because not every book would have that particular solution to having two audiences. And so that's one of the things that I love about the work is that there's such variety and such a variety of audiences that any given book can appeal to.
amazing. Talk to me about poetry.
Oh, yeah. So what do you want to know? There's so many aspects that can be covered.
I want to know your I have some poet friends. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about how that factors into your worldview.
I think the precision of language is one aspect that has been beneficial to me over time, is thinking through precisely how words have different shades of meaning. So recently I helped a client retitle his book. He had sent it out to beta readers, and one beta reader mentioned that there was another book that had sort of a similar title. And so we thought, okay, why, it would be okay if we published it perhaps, but why not just come up with something new? So we came up with something different and getting very specific about what we wanted those words to communicate and the nuances of those words was an interesting process. And cool. We were able to land on something that might, while still encapsulating the previous idea that came from different words, we're able to land on something that could become a brand around which this person builds their business. So it was a really cool process, and it's a power of words that helps that happen, and the precision with which we choose those words that helps that happen.
Love that. Yeah. I follow, I think writers something on Instagram, and they just drop these little moments of truth, which I think that words matter. Like that. I think that in today's society where we're just besieged by, all this content, we tend to forget that precision of language matters. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
I really love the work I'm doing. And one area that I'm thinking of focusing on more deeply is the clarification part of my process. So I might have mentioned to you in a conversation before this conversation that I have this 3-step process when I'm working with people on their books: clarify, storify, and amplify. And this process applies to writing anything. So even if you're writing a blog post or you're writing an article that you want to pitch to a big publication, this process applies to that. So clarify is where we're getting really clear on the audience, the content, the topics, the stories. Storify is where we're going deeper on the stories. We're figuring out what will be said in the stories. We're discussing and finalizing the architecture of the book. And then amplify is a lot about polishing and also figuring out, okay, now how do we get this book out into the world? Yeah. And I realized that the clarify stage is a lot. Well, they're all fun to work on, but I really love working on the clarify stage because people will come to me and they'll say things like, I thought before I worked with you, I had a lot of words, 30,000 words, 50,000 words. And what you helped me do was put them into a structure. Or one person said, I love how they worded it, that before I came to you, I had the materials to build a house, or I had a house, but I didn't have rooms. Like I didn't have the walls and the internal structure that would make it into a house, which is interesting. They said that because I often use a house as a way of describing the process of writing a book. But, first we're putting the big pieces in place, right? Like you're going to get the walls and the foundation in place. That's kind of the developmental editing, getting the ideas in place. Then we put up the walls and we're getting the topics sorted. And then the finishing touches would be like what faucets are going in,
Right.
are we going to have wainscoting, all that kind of thing, the furniture. So that would be more of like the polishing stage. So it's sort of interesting for me how they're a little bit like each other in a way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
In a perfect Deborah day, what happens? What's the perfect Deborah day for you?
Well, let's see. My spouse makes me a fantastic breakfast. I'm very lucky. And then we have time to talk before going off to work, which is lovely. And then I'm usually doing some kind of creative work in the morning, whether for myself or other people. And I usually, most of the time, will have meetings around 11, maybe 10, with clients, helping them with different aspects of their book. And I love that. And then, and then in there throughout the week, there's learning Spanish, which is something I'm working on. I'm working on becoming
amazing.
fluent, and also writing my own writing, and then also taking walks or otherwise exercising. Those get sprinkled in throughout.
Nice. And we don't need to know the street you go down, but the walk that you go on, is it through like a market district? Is it through a forest? Is it like what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I live in a somewhat urban area outside of Washington, D.C. So we do have a forest, maybe one, which is too small. But anyway, I normally will go over to my friend's house, and then we will walk through our town. And there's an old like train trail that's been paved over and turned into a bike trail. And we'll walk that to our lake. And if we do that, and then we walk all the way back to our house where I've left my car, it's usually 7 miles if we do the whole thing.
Wow.
So we don't always do the whole thing because of time or weather, but when we do, it's nice and long.
You mentioned books obviously are a big part of your life. Do you have a favorite author or like a type of book that you like to read? Like what's on your bookshelf? What's the Deborah go-to?
Yeah, I don't really have a type of book, but something I've been finding interesting lately is there's a book, it was a New York Times bestseller called The Collected Schizophrenias. And I read an interview with the author, and it started out as essays. And I thought that was really interesting because I think she said her editor asked her, or they were talking about how do we make this not just a collection of essays, but really make them, tie them together. So I like to read these kinds of books because they inform the way I work with my clients and the challenges that I'm helping my clients to overcome in their own writing. So as I read through these books, it's helping me become a better partner, a better thought partner for my clients. So that's something that I really like.
Oh, that's great.
So I'd say like I like to read a lot of different kinds of books, but work related, not really work related, but I enjoyed them too. It's like personal and work. There's a bit of a blending there as far as reading goes. But I really like to see how are people pushing this idea of the memoir beyond what we thought it could be 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, a memoir was very chapter based. Yeah. At least the ones I was reading at the time, or that my teachers were telling me to read 20 years ago, they were almost very novelistic. And now I find that there's more of a blend between memoir and nonfiction. And I work a lot with nonfiction. And I've helped some of my authors to create these personal storytelling, memoir, business help books, self-help books in some way. So there's kind of like a real blend of a lot of different genres, so to speak. Yeah. And I really like that. I think it's original. It is interesting to the readers because they like the storytelling aspect. They like the personal storytelling aspect as well. And the writing is often more personable. So I kind of there's a distinction between personal and personable, but personal is sometimes can be a little bit, in some cases can be a little bit too much, but personable is like relating to people, connecting to them, where they're coming from. And once you know your audience well, you can do that.
Wow. What do you, man, you're deep. I just love that you care that much about words and how we put them together. It makes my heart sore. What do you do in your spare time? Do you have spare time? Like what's your guilty pleasure?
Well, I really like the long walks. I wouldn't necessarily call that a guilty pleasure, but my friend that I walk with the most, we will have very long conversations about everything. And so spending time with a friend, getting exercise and going somewhere beautiful, to me, that is the best. Because when we get to the lake, the birds are cruising in, there's other people exercising. It's a happy environment and it feels really good. So I get to blend, something that's good for me along with something that's a pleasure as well. My other things I like to do is I'm not the best gardener in the world, but I do like to garden and try to make things grow that I can eat. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there's a drought or things happen beyond my control and I can't really make much happen out there. But I'm always happy, like when food is popping up out of the ground. And hopefully I can get some of it before the animals do. Sometimes the animals are just too fast.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. I grew a potato this summer.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was really proud and it was delicious.
Aww.
And then I was growing a cucumber, but a vole got to it. Right. But I was like, I'm kind of happy for the vole. Like I hold no ill will towards it. It had a great dinner.
Yeah. The vole's just doing vole things. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. So let's imagine for a second that you're walking down your path and in your one forest just outside of Washington, DC. It's a sunny day. Weather is inclement. It's just nice. You're not thinking about anything else other than what is the one thing that you wish the world knew?
You mean I'm walking down the street and I'm wondering this?
Yeah, you're just like, you're doing Deborah stuff. And you're just like, I really wish that the world knew this one thing. What is that?
I think it circles back to what you said about joy and writing. I wish the world knew that creation, whether it's with words or some other way, can be a joyful process. Because sometimes it can feel heavy. And sometimes, especially in the case of writing, we might have leftover feelings from high school or a teacher who was maybe harsh on us in high school or college as far as our writing went. And we might not still feel the joy that we would have when we were younger. And that to a certain extent, not the part about teachers, but to a certain extent, this idea of joy around creating can apply to anything, whether you want to do woodworking or painting or create jewelry. I think there's real value in creating things, even if you don't plan to exhibit or sell it or whatever, but like just creating it can feel very good.
Where do you find ego fits into this?
Let's see.
Is ego a thing we need to deal with?
I think so to a certain extent, but I find it somewhat empowering to create without worrying about that. So for instance, I began painting with acrylics and I have a friend who's a painter who's been painting for 20, 25 years. Oh, and wow. So when we spend time together, she'll sometimes say, we'll spend time in her studio in her backyard. And she'll say, do you want to paint? So we did that just the other day. And I said, sure. And at first I was like, I don't know what to do because I don't draw. I haven't taught myself to draw or anything. So for me, what I'm going to paint will need to be abstract for the most part. And I haven't studied painting, so I'm not an expert. So I have to be brave enough to put something down in front of my friend that is probably not going to look that great. And being a beginner, I sometimes think it's really interesting because it's almost like the process of writing or writing a book or working on some big project, except it's all happening within the span of a couple hours. So you get like all the thoughts and feelings happening. Yeah. So this is why I really recommend this. But like I'm painting, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I'm like, oh, I don't like that. And then I'm like, oh, it's looking so much better. And then I get it home and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like that process you were talking about with your editor and like, oh, I don't like it or I like it, going back and forth. So it kind of feels like that. It's also really interesting to talk with my daughter or with my friend about what I think is good or not. I don't mean about other people's work per se, but whatever I'm working on. And there was one painting I did where I didn't really like it, and neither did my daughter. And I was like, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. We agreed, but it was a little bit hard to express why, but something was missing. And probably that will come with more learning. Anyway, my friend said something that I say to people about writing. She's like, take this paper, just paint more, because as you do it more, you're going to learn more. And that really applies to writing. I'm not looking to become a painter. It's just something I enjoy doing. I'm not planning to exhibit my paintings at this point or anything like that. It's really just something for me. But it sure is enjoyable and fun. And who knows, maybe I'll do it for 20 years and end up being good. I don't know.
Oh, love it. If you could give advice, I call these people rebels in waiting. They're like, they could be would-be authors. They could be entrepreneurs about to embark on a whole new thing. What advice would you give them to, I call it the Wile E. Coyote moment, where, he walks off the cliff and just before he looks down and looks back at the camera, he's got this little uh-oh sign just before gravity takes hold.
Yeah. I've heard that.
What is your advice to rebels in waiting? How do they get to that next step?
Well, it won't sound very rebellious. However, I think that discernment can be useful, because discerning what you want now and what's the best path to get there will save you a little bit of confusion in the process of whatever you want to get to next. So I think that, and I take this just from thinking back to how I made decisions and what I would have done differently in certain ways. This is not necessarily about regret or about saying I made mistakes, because we're all going to have regrets. We're all going to make mistakes. But in terms of just making the path a little bit smoother for yourself, I think being very mindful and discerning of what will really be helpful. So case in point example is sometimes people go through a phase when they're starting a business, they're taking every class out there, and they're taking so many classes that it becomes overwhelming. And people do it for writing too. They'll be taking so many classes and they think, oh, there's one more thing I have to learn. But then what happens, it's fine to take classes. There's nothing bad about that. But if it's becoming something that's preventing you from really moving forward, it's good to take some time to reflect and see, is the class supporting me, or is this path I'm taking supporting me, or is it just providing another distraction that's making me slow down for no good reason?
Are you a run into the ocean person or a wade slowly into the ocean person?
I probably go slowly because the ocean is usually too cold.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. I'm always stunned by the freezing aspect of it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, the Atlantic is cold. I give you that. That's such a weird question to end on, but what's your favorite place to travel to? Where do you like to go in the world?
Oh, wow. I really had a fabulous time in London, and we went in December a couple years ago, and I found neighborhoods that felt like where I grew up in Maryland, which was surprising.
Wow.
And I also liked the variety of what was on offer, the good food and the museums and the fact that you could walk a lot and always see something interesting was very appealing.
Did you, I've been to London all of one time. And I'll just say Europe in general, is the one thing that struck me was just how old things are.
Yeah.
Because I think that we tend to, you're from the US, I'm from Canada. Everything here is relatively new. 150 years is old for us. Over there, I remember seeing a gravestone from the 1600s. And I'm like, what? Did that strike you as, did that give you an aha moment?
It is kind of wild sometimes. Yeah, it is. It is wild to think about that in terms of, what we had records for and, what places were, I guess, making note of the years at different points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely something a little bit different to take into account. And also just interesting to think about the history, like thinking back in our families and how people came here. And I realized since my grandmother did genealogy, how many of my relatives were coming here because of, discord, because they weren't the right religion or they wanted to marry someone of a different social class or whatever it was. And then they're like, okay, just go to America.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Where are your people from? If you don't mind my asking.
No, I don't mind. The ones I know about are from England, France, a lot from Germany. And then some from New York, like Mohawk. I think
wow.
I think that's the gist. I think that's the gist of it.
Oh, that's wild. That's fun. I could talk to you for hours. Deborah.
I know I could talk to you for hours too. You're a great conversationalist. Thank you.
Thank you. So one last question. Your favorite, and only because I'm so damn curious now, because I mean, crab cakes, I would assume is probably going to be the answer, but what's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, my go-to comfort food.
Yeah.
It's actually not crab cakes. I think it's a tradition in some parts of the US to eat black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. And so we have to buy them in advance because the stores will get sold out. And sometimes you'll meet people in the aisles who are looking for the black-eyed peas as well.
Oh my God,
you can get them in cans, which is the easiest way to deal with them. And then, and so we'll make those with greens. And if the greens have some bacon or ham in them, so much the better. But it's kind of like it's kind of a Southern thing.
Damn.
American Southern thing.
Yeah. Outstanding. Again, Deborah, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. What's your next book?
My next book of my own is I'm working on a novel, and we shall see how it goes. Yeah. Where
do we find you in the world? Shameless plugs.
Yeah, please feel free to visit me at my website, radiantmedialabs.com. If you're thinking about writing a book, I have a free assessment tool called the Dream Book Launcher that helps you get personalized next steps by answering 17-ish questions. It only takes about 2 or 3 minutes to get through it, and it will give you some suggestions and next steps that you can take if you're interested in writing a book.
Amazing. Deborah Ager, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and I love your podcast. So thank you.
Hey, it's me again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're an artist, entrepreneur, or business owner who believes your brand can be more than it is, head over to brandjitsu.com and join the list to get your copy of my book, Brand Jitsu, Move Your Brand from Meh to Memorable. I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, why don't you head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out our guest request form. Share or subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And thanks so much for listening. Until next time.